I've known Jim since I was 2.5. Let me start here. My dad bought his first race car in 1957. My dad's Valerie Willis. He had the car. They lived in an apartment which had no garage. Jim was a paper boy, and he passed us sometimes. He had a few customers on Iowa Avenue, where we lived on the east side of Joliet. He would drive his bike back and forth, and he saw the race car in the driveway. Well, he knew somebody that was a racer, lived there, of course, and he just adored racing. He always said that he wanted to be a midget racer. He would buy what's called Speed Age magazine, which they don't sell anymore, but he would buy it every week when it came out. His heroes were Troy Ruttman, Gary Bettenhausen, and Bookfitch. So he saw the race car over at the apartment building one day, and it was winter. My dad had a tarp over the car to protect it from the snow. And Jim and I were talking about this one day, a couple years ago, and he said, when he saw that there was a race car sitting in a driveway with a tarp over it in the wintertime, and I'm quoting, "It was blasphemous." And he goes, "Oh!" So he just couldn't figure out why my dad would keep it in there. He didn't find a garage. Well, a couple of years later, well, I take it back, it was December of 1958, my parents bought their first house on Miller Avenue, just a couple blocks from where they were. Jim still was passing the paper, and he had some clients, customers on Miller Avenue, which is where we lived. They lived on 2nd Avenue, which we could see. I could see his house from my front porch. So he was passing papers, and he happened to see a race car trailer in the driveway. So my dad was out working on the car, which he did all the time, whether it was rain or snow, 0 degrees or 100. The garage door was open, and Dad was working on the car. He passed by. He passed by again. Then he stopped at the edge of the driveway on his bicycle, and my dad looked up and he saw him there, and he said, cover his ears, "Jesus Christ, don't just stand there, come on down and I'll put you to work." So he did. And Jim was like totally elated. So for probably, well, up until Jim was 21 years old, he was at our house every Saturday during the week, polishing wheels, changing tires, whatever it took. Now, let's back up a little bit. I was 2.5, all right? Jim was a cutie in my eyes. So when I knew that he was coming over to the house, and he always called first, there were no cell phones, my dad would say, "Hey, Helen," my mom, "Jim's gonna come over and send him back to the garage." So when I heard that, I'm like, okay. So I would look out of my mom and dad's bedroom windows. I could see him walking down the street. I took off like a bat out of hell, out of their bedroom, down the hallway, through the dining room, and into the living room so I could grab the door. Well, at 2.5 years old, and you're running, you catch your foot on the carpeting more than once, and you fall flat on your face. My mom said I had a black and blue forehead and rug burns on my forehead for about a year. So, and Jim hated kids. He would say that they did not belong in a garage. They didn't belong around race cars, especially girls. And I would go out there anyway. And he would try to get rid of me, but it did not work. And I told him one day that it was my dad's garage. I like the race cars, and I'm going to be here. So then that kind of pissed him off. Another time I was out there, and he said, "You know, you really shouldn't be here. This is man's work." And that was it right there. You know, even at like 7 or 8 years old, I'm like, I don't think so. So he, under his breath, he goes, "Help," and he said, "Your mom's calling you," and I'm like, I don't think so. Then he would say, to try to get rid of me, that he was going to start the race car out, kill switch, and I didn't know what it was. So at the time, I believed him. So when my dad came home from work, I asked him, he said, "You know, this is what Jim did. Can he start up the race car?" Dad cracked up and he says, "No, the only way you can start the race car up is by, you know, pushing it with a push truck like you do with races." I'm like, okay. So the next time he did, I told him, I said, "No, you don't start them up like that. You start them with a push truck." So he was stuck again. He just couldn't get rid of it. But anyway, in 1964, after the season was over with, Jim and a friend of his, Raleigh Cadwin, who Raleigh owned a gas station and Jim worked there, Raleigh and Jim decided to buy a race car. And Jim told his dad, and his dad said, "I'm not going to co-sign for you. Jim said, "You don't have to co-sign for a race car." And then Jim's dad goes, "Well, I'm not going to pay the insurance." But there's no insurance. His dad said, "Well, what happens if you wreck?" "I'm not going to wreck." Famous last words, right, guys? So anyway, Jim was not old enough to drive yet. So after they bought the car, they got it ready, and Raleigh drove the car for a while. Then he had an accident, and it included my dad. And Raleigh decided he wasn't going to race anymore. So they parked it. They repainted the car on Jim's request. My dad's car was what they called Cadillac Cream with a number 5. That's what my dad is kind of known for. It's number 5, black number 5 road. So since Dad had number 5, Jim wanted number 6. So, and he finally, it was the night before his first race at the Joliet Stadium. He couldn't sleep. He walked out to the garage. He stood there and he's looking at it. And he goes, "You better not hurt me." And it didn't. His first race, the very first time he got pushed off at the stadium, I ran over to the side of the grandstand, you know, where you could look into the pits. I always did anyways, watch my dad. And I was there and I was waiting for Jim to get pushed off. He's sitting there in the car. He looked real cool, calm, and collected, like he always did. And I asked him about that one day, and he said, "I was so nervous, I thought I was going to throw up." And I said, "Well, you know, you hit it good." But he didn't do too good his first year. He did win one heat race, and it was a slow heat. But his parents did finally come out to watch him. They were scared because they knew that it was dangerous. And that was their baby son. So Jim won a heat race, a slow heat, when his parents were there. And he was so happy that they were there, and his father was so proud that when he went to work, he was telling everybody about his son winning a race. Jim didn't have the heart to tell him it was a slow heat. So after the season was over with, Jim and Raleigh decided they did not want to be car owners anymore, and it was just too expensive. So they sold the car, and Jim started running for Frank Capon. And they did pretty good. They went down to Florida. They won a couple of heat races, and they really thought that they were like, it was like winning the Indianapolis 500 because they had all this money, but a lot of them were singles and 5s. They were sitting on the bed in the hotel room, and they had all this money spread out. And Jim thought it was going to be like this forever. The next race wasn't, they weren't so lucky. So anyway, he ran for Frank, I believe it was for 2 years. And then he ran for Frank Musha, Russell Gamester. But in '69, and I think, Shirley, Didn't Jim run for your dad in '69 for a couple races?
I can't remember when he started. Do you kids remember?
I thought it was just a couple races in '69.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. Well, he was asked by Frank Cater, who had a car that ran Badger. And Frank could not keep drivers. Everybody bailed on him. So he asked Jim if he would drive the car. And Jim said, yeah, sure. So he ran up there every Sunday, and whenever they had other races, Hales Corner, whatever, Beaver's Dam. And at that time, Billy Wood and Owen Snyder were running, and they were the top dogs up there. Jim always finished third in the feature. But he said he didn't mind because third place finisher got a case of beer. So he said that was cool. And one night, the two didn't show up. He won the feature that night. And he said he was kind of looking for his case of beer, but it wasn't there. The guy who finished third got the beer. So he won the championship that year, and by winning one feature, but running consistent. And Frank always called him champ every time he ran into Frank. He's like, how you doing, champ? And that was the only championship that Frank Cater ever won. And years later, Frank passed away, but Jim was always glad that he was able to give that to Frank. And because he was really a great guy and he thought a lot of him. But, well then, you know, I think everybody pretty much knows the rest of the story. He went on to run for Bob Lockhart. He ran for the Gamester family. He ran for Harry Turner. He went down to the, what was it, in Texas. Astronaut. He ran down there. He got passed numerous times by A.J. Floyd, but that made him happier than hell. In fact, A.J. came over and worked on Harry's car, and he's standing there and he's like, A.J.'s working on my car. But he, as we all know, he had a very long and illustrious career. He's a good guy. And I'm really proud to say that I've known him since I was 2 1/2. And those are things that we talked about that a lot of people would never know about. But I always picked his brain. And he always told me that I should have been a detective because I ask a lot of questions. And I'm like, it's the way it is, you know? But if I hadn't asked the questions, I wouldn't have been able to share this with you guys. And I think this is some pretty special, these are special memories. But I hope that this gave you a little bit more of a broader picture of the person that he was. And what did they call him? The humble badass, I guess? And he was kind of embarrassed by it because he never looked at himself as a badass. But he passed away on February 11th. He left a huge void in my life and in the life of others. So I'm very glad that Al asked me to speak on his behalf. And I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you.